Welcome to Adoption Matters. Today we are here with Kelly Widner. Jean is the author of a new book, The Adoption Paradox: Putting Adoption in Perspective. We're going to be talking with her today about her road to understanding adoption and why she wrote this important book. Jean was born in 1965, and she was raised in Washington State as an adoptee. After having a mostly positive experience growing up, she shares her story as it continues to evolve, navigating the adoption complexities. Her book includes a fascinating history of adoption, as well as individual stories from birth parents, adoptive parents, and adoptees that bring an authenticity to the adoption narrative. Jean currently lives in Boulder City with her husband and 2 dogs, and she loves traveling the American West in their camping van while they work and play. Jean, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here with all of you.
Well, we're so excited for you to be here with us, and we really look forward to learning about your story and the work that you're doing in the adoption community. I'm wondering if you can maybe first start by sharing some of the parts of your personal story that you're comfortable with today.
Sure. Yeah. As my intro says, I'm a domestic baby scoop era, adoptee, born in 1965. My birth mother, unfortunately, she was from the upper Midwest, but as I understand it, she had dated my father for some period of time. He was unwilling or unable to marry her and couldn't support them. And she unfortunately also apparently had an abusive stepfather in the home. And so they needed to get her out of there. And she went all the way to Spokane, Washington, where she was at a Salvation Army home for unwed mothers, one of the Booth hospitals there on the West Coast. And she had me there. And then 2 months later, I was adopted by George and Mary and Kelly, and they're my parents who raised me. So, I grew up in Yakima, Washington. Dad was a school psychologist. Mother was a registered nurse. And, the thing that I say is they got more right than wrong in adoption. They kind of accidentally ran on instinct, told me very young. I grew up knowing that I was adopted. I don't have any memory of being told. And they did love me. I mean, they loved me unconditionally. They never otherized me. They never allowed anybody to otherize me. They celebrated my differences rather than, being critical of them. So I grew up and had a mostly idyllic childhood as an only child.
Wow. That's amazing. Being a fellow adoptee, I resonate with what you're saying, and how we grow up and what that means to us personally. But the title of this podcast is "My Adoption Was a Good Adoption." Okay, fellow adoptee, you got some explaining to do. What does that mean?
Sure. I mean, oh, there's the layers, right? I'm definitely one of those folks who would have said adoption never affected me. And now, as a 60-year-old woman, I'm very grateful to have come to the understanding and the ways in which it has actually, shown itself to me. And I mean, I did have a good adoption. Like I said, my parents got a lot right. I never remember feeling bad about mentioning my mother, my birth mother. I never remember feeling like I couldn't bring her up. I always remember that my parents addressed her with respect. And I appreciate that even more, now that as I've grown older and can see the world through all of its different lenses that we have to as grown-ups. And even when I would do that typical rebellion thing as a teenager and say, someday I'm going to go find my real mother, my father's actual response was, great. I hope you find her. Because if you do, I'd love to meet her and I'd love to thank her, which, I mean, really, like, this is the 70s. That was a really gracious response to that whole thing. And of course, you're trying to be that rebellious teenager. So that really sucks the air out of that dig, right? But yeah, I mean, I did have a good adoption story for the most part. My mother did have some issues with prescription drugs and alcohol. So we did have addiction in the family when I was growing up, and that certainly did affect things. Um, and she sought help for that when I was a teenager. And then I also got help through Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is another 12-step group that is adjacent to AA. And that was very helpful for me, but I still never believed that adoption affected me.
Wow. Wow. So I don't want to take away from anybody else's, but I'm curious, like when did the fog lift?
Mm. In writing the book, for sure.
All right.
Mm,
I mean,
interesting.
for all the work that I did do on myself, because, that's the problem is when you do come from a home where you've got some amount of dysfunction, right? We all develop coping mechanisms, and all of us develop coping mechanisms for one way or another. I mean,
Sure.
I think the great misnomer is that there's a normal home. I think most homes have some varying degree of something, wandering around through the people, because we're all individuals and we all come packing our own Samsonite into our own relationships as we, then marry and have kids and however that goes. And then you pile in adoption and you're off to the races on that, right? So, with all of the work that I did do on myself, and, I did seek therapy and really worked hard to take responsibility for the pieces of my life that I had to take responsibility for, and allow grace and understanding for my parents for the mistakes that they made. Like, Dad, you had a pharmacy in your freaking bathroom and you didn't pay attention to that, really? Those little things that kind of can grow up and do together. And I mean, we did have some really good years where we were living in a place that was completely recalibrated our relationship, and where we were a really good team, me and my mother and my father. And I really am glad that we got that time and those years. And I will still tell you, I've wandered through life always still feeling this very, very deep feeling of unworthiness. It's like imposter syndrome on steroids. Like, I just
Mm,
have always wrestled with that feeling of being good enough to stand in my own sunlight
mhm,
and feel like I could take my place there. And my husband knows it. My best friends know it. They see it. And there it always was, that constant companion.
mm,
And in coming to realize what separation trauma does, in that when you take an infant away from its mother, the nervous system knows that. And then my personality is forming up under the shadow of loss.
mhm,
And none of us knew that, and none of us understood that. And it starts to make so much sense. There's the rational mind that sits there and says, well, why should an adoptee feel shame for their circumstances? And then there's the irrational mind that just says, or not irrational, but the unconscious mind that just says, because it does, even if, and here's, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just still there. And so many adoptees that I know have some variation of that.
Jean, is this the paradox?
Yeah, it is. I can
Mhm,
be grateful and genuinely grateful. Okay. I feel love, appreciation, respect for my parents because they did the job and they did a good job and they were good people. And I'm glad that they ended up being my raising parents. And I can still feel angry and resentful and frustrated at the way that the system back then treated my mother, and at the things that I see happening still now in our culture. I don't feel like we've evolved as much as we think that we have. And that
neither
makes me,
do we.
yeah. Neither do you, neither do we. Yeah. That's why we're here talking about adoption, right?
Like, what would you, I mean, I'm listening to this from the adoptive parent, through the adoptive parent lens.
Sure.
I think of my kids and I resonate with that, what you're saying from what I can visibly see and have experienced. And as a parent, I just am like, is there anything I can do? I'm sure you're probably wondering too, Kim, on your end. Are there things we can do as parents?
I think so. I mean, obviously the first step is always awareness, right? And I think gosh, as I interviewed so many adoptive parents for my book, it's like I always tried to embody their wisdom because I myself am not a parent. And so I get that adoptive parents, I think, are constantly trying to straddle, okay, what part of what I'm seeing is maybe just normal kid stuff? What part of this is just this pile of DNA that makes a person? And what are their intrinsic tolerances for life and humanity and all of its strife, and what is their level of resilience in this little child that is in front of me? And then what part of this is adoption, and what part of this is potentially like trauma, from that first maternal separation? And I think I adoptive parenting is a big job. It's a hard job, and it shouldn't be entered into trivially. And I think that adoptive parents, first and foremost, need to have that awareness that this isn't going to quite be the same. And anybody who tells you that is lying to you. And so I think that that's one of the first things. And then I think the second thing is, love is not a cure-all, but it is a good place to start. And I think that whether we understand it or not, as an infant, that infant is going to need bonding and healing. And I'm going to bond and heal with you because I need to. My survival depends upon it. But then you've got to leave space for the ways that trauma is going to manifest itself in some way. And so your job, I think, then as an adoptive parent, just becomes attunement to trying to understand, okay, my kid and I need to have a really, really good mechanism for communicating. And I need to be really, really listening to my kid. Because I think adoptive parents, for the most part, do want to do the job well, right? And the thing again, in talking to both adoptive parents who were in the book and just others that I know, it's like if one of their kids is struggling or suffering, I mean, a good parent will do anything to make sure that their child isn't suffering. You will chew off your right arm to make sure that your child doesn't suffer. And so one of the frustrating things through this sort of built up ignorance and rainbow and unicorns and just take the child home and love it, they're a blank slate, blah, 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 all the things that we know have fed into this doctrine in the past, it sets everybody up for failure. And how horrendous is that to do to an adoptive parent? And then I see anger in the adoptive parent community going, I really wish somebody would have given me a clue. And that's, I think, the work that we're trying to do. And it's a big job. And I think sometimes children do need to be raised in a home that is not with their biological parents. No child should be unsafe. I think that there are, at times, necessary relinquishments. I think they're a fraction of how often they happen because we've entered into a marketplace scenario where there are pressures being brought on women that are inherently unfair. So with that said, nonetheless, if an adoption is necessary, we want it to be as strong as possible. We want parents to be as prepared as possible. And again, that's a big job to be trying to constantly weigh all of that because they've got DNA and tendencies and, all of these aspects to their personality and their character and their interests and whatnot that are gonna form, which it does make a case for having birth parents around and involved and in that child's life, because it can help make some of those things a lot more clear.
Sure. I think, we have something called the adoption attunement element, and one of them is acknowledge grief and loss.
Mhm.
And it sounds easy, but I think that sometimes for adopted parents, our instinct is to try to immediately say, but I love you, or but you're feeling bad about yourself, but you're beautiful. Can't you see you're beautiful? Can't, or anything that we like that trying to build up. I think it can backfire a lot because it completely, like you said, it completely minimizes or even dismisses the feeling that our children are having. And for a parent to acknowledge grief and loss issues is for a parent to sit with it with their children. That's my feeling. And to not take it away, but to actually validate it. Like you said, it's a huge loss. How could there not be things? And it doesn't say anything about the adopted parent so much when a parent says, I can see that. That doesn't create a problem this is in my thinking now. That actually says, I see you.
Right.
I see you as my child, and I see the pain. Like you said, who would want a child to go through that pain? And by us saying, oh, but you're beautiful and we love you and you shouldn't feel bad, all that, just jumping to that, we are actually breaking attunement. We're not attuning to our children.
Correct. And I mean, I will say, speaking for me, I completely shut down on any ability to have any communication with my parents about these topics. Any feelings of insecurity or uncertainty or, things that, teachers or, well-intended, youth group, Sunday school, church, blah, blah, blah. I had no language as a child to be able to even bring it to my parents. And then I didn't even know how to pull out some of the emotions that I was actually feeling, like to actually be able to extract that and identify that, you know. And so what I ended up feeling was just confused and alone. And I think that that's really sad because then I look back at myself and I can see that sad little girl who just put on a mask and pretended she was fine. And that's also a really dangerous place to be with your kid, because if they can't bring the things to you that they're going to need to bring to you, then there's no trust. And if there's no trust, then there's no safety. And you've already got a damaged child.
It sounds like your book is going to equip parents more in that way. Can you tell us a little bit more about your book and the impact that you hope it makes?
Yeah, thank you. I interviewed close to 100 people for this work. There were easily 50 to 60 adoptees, all adults, and 20 to 25 birth parents, 20 to 30 adoptive parents. I included in that foster care parents and foster care alumni, also children who were transracially adopted, internationally adopted, and tried to really cover a lot of bases, as well as, excuse me, therapists and other industry experts, to try to get a good sense of things. And then I also hired 2 researchers. We spent 3 years researching data for the book. And so in the course of all of that, it definitely gives you a sense of the idea that everyone in this, we used to call it the triad. Now we've expanded it to the constellation, but everyone is hurting just a little bit differently. And, we, one of the things, like, even as, we're talking about advice to adoptive parents, we have to bring it outside of just this constellation, and we have to bring it to the larger society, because our society does not get this. They
Very
just
true.
don't. They
Yeah.
do not get it. And so adoptive parents can do everything right. And you know, a child is still going to encounter the idea that, oh, isn't that so nice? They rescued that child. You know, you'd be dead in a third world country by now. I mean, who knows where you'd be? You know, aren't you grateful to your parents? And just all of these assumptions that our society piles on. And they do the same thing to adoptive parents. They do the same thing to birth parents. I think birth parents are probably even the least understood in the entire triad. And so what I tried to do with the book is to bring everybody gets a deep dive, everybody gets their say, and just literally try to almost report on that. This is what the constellation is feeling. This is what the lived experience of these folks are like. And then here's the research to back it up. And oh, by the way, let's take a look at this industry and let's look at our child welfare system at large, because that's still the system everybody's wandering around in. Whether we like it or not, it's the system we have. And so we need to try to keep making it better. And we need to try to really actually put the adopted child or the child at the center of it. That's what I try to do.
That's amazing, Jean. And thank you so much for sharing with us today your story as well as what you're up to lately. And just for our viewers, the book is entitled The Adoption Paradox, Putting Adoption in Perspective. And that is by Jean Widner. Thank you, Jean. We really enjoyed having you today. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Jean.
so much for having me. I appreciate all you ladies. It's been wonderful to get to know you in the process.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
been a
pleasure.
joy to hear your insight and understand a little bit about who you are, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. All right. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you'll join us again next time on Adopted Matters.